Welcome back to Outside Views, and today we're talking about the final wall being built around the European market, the EU Industrial Accelerator Act, and the end of the British Green Dream. And my personal view is that the UK is about to find out that having world-leading green tech means nothing if you aren't allowed to sell it to your biggest customer. It's January 2026, and the outside view is that Brussels has stopped just regulating and has started protecting with a vengeance. The Industrial Accelerator Act, which is being finalized right now, is essentially a Buy European manifesto disguised as a climate policy. And I believe this is the ultimate checkmate move by the EU. They are introducing European preference criteria for public procurement in every strategic sector, from wind turbines to green hydrogen. And if you are a British company building the most efficient electrolyzers in the world, you are about to discover that under the new 2026 rules, an EU-based competitor will win the contract simply because they are made in Europe. And my strong personal view is that Keir Starmer's clean energy superpower mission is being cut off at the knees before it even gets started. We're witnessing the birth of a fortress Europe for green tech, and Britain, the country that once led the Industrial Revolution, is currently standing on the wrong side of the gate. And the irony is that the UK thinks it can play whack-a-mole with individual rules while the EU is rewriting the entire rulebook to ensure they win the race for the next century. I believe that by late 2026, the term level playing field will be a joke that only British politicians still tell. The reality is that Made in Britain is quickly becoming a disadvantage in the biggest green market on the whole planet. And let's look at the hidden teeth of this new act, the sustainability and resilience criteria. On the surface, these sound great. Who doesn't want resilient supply chains? But my view is that resilience is just a polite word for not British and not Chinese. Starting in late 2026, any company bidding for a large-scale EU green energy project will have to prove that a significant percentage of their value add happens within the EU or the EEA. And this means that even if a UK firm has a brilliant design, they may be forced to move their entire manufacturing base to France or Poland just to stay eligible for tenders. And I believe we're about to see a brain drain and a factory drain out of the UK as green tech startups realize that the British domestic market is simply too small to sustain them. And the outside view is that the EU is using its massive €14 billion Horizon Europe budget for 2026 and 2027 to subsidize its own champions while locking everyone else out of the bidding process. By 2026, the Strategic Technologies for Europe platform will be in full swing, pouring billions into technologies that the EU has decided are critical for its economic security. And I think it's a tragedy that British taxpayers funded the initial research for many of these technologies only to see the EU reap the industrial rewards without them, because they left. And the UK is essentially being told, you can watch us build the future, but you can't help us build it. And then there's the Industrial Decarbonisation Bank, which is set to launch in the second quarter of 2026 with a potential budget of €100 billion. This bank will provide massive subsidies and carbon contracts for difference to EU-based companies to help them scale up. And my personal view is that the UK's own National Wealth Fund looks like a piggy bank compared to the financial firepower Brussels is putting on the table. British green tech firms aren't just fighting a red tape battle. They are fighting an unfair fight where their competitors are getting state-backed billions that they cannot access. And I find it incredibly frustrating that the UK government is still talking about pragmatic resets when the EU is clearly moving toward a closed-loop economy for strategic technologies. By the end of 2026, the Circular Economy Act will also kick in, and that requires that raw materials like lithium and copper be recycled within the EU to stay in the value chain. And this pillar of circularity is designed to reduce the EU's dependence on third country suppliers. And unfortunately, the UK is, even if some still don't want to hear it, the UK is now a third country. And I believe the UK is being treated as a resource colony, good enough to send raw data or electricity through the cable, but not good enough to participate in the high-value manufacturing that creates real wealth, because they decided that they don't want that. And when the EU decides that 24% of all materials must be circular by 2030, they aren't looking to import those materials from a non-member who doesn't follow their specific recycling standards. And the most dangerous part of this for the UK is the revision of the public procurement directives coming in the fourth quarter of 2026. And this is where the European preference becomes a legal mandate rather than just a suggestion. In the past, EU law generally required the most economically advantageous tender, which gave British firms a fair shot on price and quality. Now, the law is being rewritten to prioritize strategic autonomy, and that's ironic, and non-price criteria. And my view is that this is the final mole in the game of whack-a-mole, and it's one that the UK can't just negotiate away with a veterinary deal or a security pact. And my outside view is that the EU is preparing for a G2 world dominated by the US and China, and they have decided that Britain is simply an afterthought in that struggle. And I believe that if Starmer doesn't secure a full exemption from these Buy-European rules by the end of this year, which he will not get, I'm quite sure about that, the UK's Green Industrial Strategy will be a 10-year plan for a dead-end street. And with that, we know the timeline for a very brave decision in the UK. And the new Clean Industrial Deal explicitly mentions ensuring a level playing field with non-European competition, which is code for making life difficult for anyone outside the bloc. And even if a British company is 10% cheaper, they will lose the contract because they don't meet the resilience quota that requires EU-made components. And I think the reset is turning into a redefinition, where Britain is redefined as a competitor to be managed and not a partner to be helped. And let's talk about the low-carbon product label, which is the giant mallet currently being built by Brussels. This label, launching for steel in 2025, as you know, and followed by cement and other products in 2026, will become the standard for lead markets. And my personal view is that this is a de facto trade barrier that goes far beyond simple carbon taxes. Even if the UK links its carbon market to the EU's, British firms will still have to go through the bureaucratic nightmare of proving their products meet the EU-specific low-carbon methodology. The European Commission is simplifying and harmonizing these methodologies for its members, but for those on the outside, it's just more red tape. And I believe that by the end of 2026, unlabeled British products will be relegated to the bargain bin of the European market, while labeled EU products enjoy premium prices and guaranteed demand. The EU is essentially creating a private club for green manufacturers, and they've conveniently lost the UK's invitation in the post-Brexit mail. And the outside view is that the UK is being forced to follow EU standards just to keep its head above water, without having any say in how those standards are designed. And this is the vassal state scenario that the Brexiteers were so afraid of. Yet it is happening precisely because they left the room where the decisions are made. So in conclusion, the Industrial Accelerator Act is the final proof that global Britain was a fantasy. The world is fragmenting into giant trading blocs, and the UK is currently a small, lonely island floating between them. And my personal view is that every day you spend tinkering with the Brexit deal is another day the EU uses to build its wall higher. And by late 2026, the green tech companies that were supposed to be the future of the UK economy will have a choice. Stay in the UK and starve, or move to the EU and thrive. And the outside view is that the EU is winning the race for the 21st century by being unashamedly protectionist, and the UK is losing it by being unashamedly optimistic about a reset that isn't coming. It's time to stop playing whack-a-mole and start realizing that the game is being rigged against you from the inside out. And if you want to be part of the green industrial revolution, you have to be part of the bloc that's leading it. The Clean Industrial Deal is a warning shot to the world, but for Britain, it sounds like the closing of a door. And I believe that the not-so-secret Europhiles in the Labour Party I talked about this week know this, but they are too scared of the 2016 ghost to tell the public the whole truth. The truth is that you can't have strategic autonomy if you are a medium-sized island parked right next to a regulatory superpower that has decided to ignore you. The whack-a-mole game is over. The moles have taken the hammer and are using it to build a wall.